Wow, it is March Madness, and I don't know about your bracket, but my bracket, well, let's just say it's busted. When the Louisville Cardinals went home in the first game of the first round, that it kind of sent me down a bad path on the bracket, but that's okay. It's all kind of madness still going on. But as for the free agency madness that as Ravens fans we've been concerned with, it's starting to calm, and we're about to see really what the fallout of all this activity, this flurry of free agency movement that we've seen take place, particularly in the AFC North that we're so interested in because of how close that hits to home. What did the Baltimore Ravens accomplish in this free agency? Well, quite a few people out there are saying that we did pretty good. We'll talk about why on today's episode of One Flock. I'm your host, Rob Love. Thanks for flying with the brother. Let's get it going right after this.
Let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens. We are one flock, we are one flock, we are one flock, we are one flock.
Hello again and welcome to another edition of One Flock. I am your host, Rob Love, and I am super happy and ecstatic to be back with you guys because, you know, even though people say this is the boring season, this is the time when NFL fans are like, what's happening? Hey, there's a lot happening, and we're going to dig into that here. A lot of things have happened over the past couple of weeks that are going to have long-term effects on the Baltimore Ravens, and we'll get more into that as we proceed through this episode. Now, if you've been listening to the noise out there, you've heard some people who seem to be very unhappy with what they call inactivity that the Baltimore Ravens have had in this offseason. No big glamour signings like getting a Tyreek Hill. You know, remember when that was a big signing that happened? People were like, oh, my goodness. And then this year, of course, you see the big time moves that people have made with these big signings, these expensive franchise level signings that are going to bankrupt some teams. We'll talk about that in a minute. But others have said that very quietly, under the radar, your Baltimore Ravens, my Baltimore Ravens, have ever so suddenly cornered the NFL with some very, very well thought out moves. Now, how you feel about that? Feel free to put it in the comments. I'm sure there will be lots of discussion, but you may feel a little bit differently after today's episode. We're about to dig into all of it now. So let's just go ahead and get started. We're going to dig right into it with one of the signings that I was hoping we would make. If you know, Tylan Wallace has been with our Baltimore Ravens for quite a few years now, never been a starter. But one thing we've become familiar with Tylan Wallace is if you put him in the game, whether that was on returns, whether you put him in on special teams, whether you put him in, as we had to in the playoffs last year, to replace your wide receivers because they were hurt, injured, Tylan Wallace has delivered in big moments at big times. In fact, he's done it so often that many begin to wonder, what would Tylan Wallace do if he was a starter? What would he look like? And no doubt other teams were thinking about this as well, which is why some thought that with Tylan Wallace being eligible to move in free agency this year, that we might lose this valuable depth member to our wide receiver room. Well, the Ravens made sure that did not happen. Many of us were happy to hear that Tylan Wallace has been brought back. He's being brought back to fulfill the role that he's been in. He's on a one-year deal. And that right there gives some security to a wide receiver room that we know needs it, because what we've seen, if anything, for the past few years is that injuries can strike. And when they do, if you don't have someone on the bench to come in and fill that hole with reliable, big-time play, then that can be a huge problem. So many teams have been bitten by that, and we certainly have been in the past. But right now, this move, signing Tylan Wallace, huge, huge, huge deal for the Baltimore Ravens to do. The one-year deal, really, as you're going to see with a lot of these other moves as we look at them, makes it clear that the Ravens are in win-now mode. Eric DeCosta is putting together a team that he is hoping will bring home the Lombardi that we're hoping we get as well next year. And that could not be emphasized anymore by this next signing that we're going to talk about right now, which is also in the wide receiver room. We talked about it a little bit earlier on our last episode. Everyone talked about it. It was a lot of buzz. But DeAndre Hopkins, D-Hop being added to a Rashad Bateman, to a Zay Flowers, Tylan Wallace being back in that room. You now have, think about this, Zay Flowers as your 1, Rashad Bateman as your 2, DeAndre Hopkins as your 3, and this amazing big play security blanket with Tylan Wallace as your number 4. The wide receiver room is looking really good. Now, what are we getting with DeAndre Hopkins? Well, is he an aging wide receiver? Yes. But let's be really, let's not get carried away with these numbers when we're talking about wide receivers. We're not talking about a wide receiver who has been banged up like a running back would at the age of 32. We're talking about a wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins who has been an absolute superhero, a mutant, if you want to say it, an avenger when it comes to route running in this game. But the biggest thing, perhaps, that the Ravens are going to benefit from by having a DeAndre Hopkins in the room is that DeAndre Hopkins, right now, is still one of the most sure-handed receivers in the NFL. In fact, I got to pull this stat up. I want to say he's caught. Wow. He's a 3-time first-team All-Pro. Hopkins provides the surest hands. It says over the last 5 years, he's tied for 6th in the NFL with a 1.5% drop rate. That means he is not dropping the ball 98.5% of the time. Tell me we don't need that on this team. The dropsies, I don't want to bring up recent bad memories, but my goodness, he's a huge sign for this room. And people, we're not expecting out of our number 3 wide receiver to get, Pro Bowl DeAndre Hopkins from his prime. No, if DeAndre Hopkins gives us that sure-handed big play threat, think of the space. Think of the space that is going to be commanded in the secondary when they're playing against a DeAndre Hopkins, a Zay Flowers, a Rashad Bateman, Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, Derrick Henry. Think of how spread that defense is going to be. This was a huge signing. DeAndre Hopkins coming on board. And again, 1-year deal, bargain deal. The Ravens were able to pull this off for $5 million. And we talked about it a little bit in a previous episode. When you take that $5 million that we spent for DeAndre Hopkins, and then you compare that with the money that a Cooper Kupp is demanding. Cooper Kupp is demanding many times that, and you want to pull up the stats of Cooper Kupp over the last couple of years and DeAndre Hopkins, they are almost identical. They are almost identical. The value that the Ravens are picking up with getting one, DeAndre Hopkins, to really shore up what is looking to be an impressive wide receiver room for the best quarterback in the league, Lamar Jackson, this year. It cannot be overstated, and we will not understate it here. It is a huge deal. Our wide receiver room got absolutely shored up, and I would say beyond shored up. I would say it got elevated with the 2 signings of Tylan Wallace, keeping him, and then adding DeAndre Hopkins to that room. You can say, arguably, that we have 3 number 1 wide receivers. Rashad Bateman has been a 1. Zay Flowers is a 1. DeAndre Hopkins has been a 1. And we don't have to worry about ego because where we just picked up DeAndre Hopkins from with the Kansas City Chiefs, he had already transitioned into being a support role. So he, if you listen to any of the comments that came from that team, they all say the same thing. DeAndre Hopkins was an asset in that locker room. He was not what we've seen some of these other big-time, big-name wide receivers when they get transitioned to not being the number 1 anymore, where they want to complain and cry and cause division. That is not what DeAndre Hopkins was. We really got a stud with this guy, and I'm excited to see what happens with the room. But let's go on to this next one. This is one that a lot of people missed. And And again, it's not a big time, like super signing, but Jake Hummel, linebacker core, he's on a 1-year deal. Now, who is Jake Hummel? Well, Jake Hummel, we picked him up from free agency. And what do we need a linebacker for? Well, remember who we lost. We lost Malik Harrison. He's the latest Exodus member from the Ravens to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We don't want to talk about that. But Chris Board also left. He went to the Giants. So both of these guys, 718 snaps that they combined for on special teams last season. That's a lot of your special teams activity. So Jake Hummel, who we picked up on a one-year deal now, we obtained him from the Rams. That's one of his specialties. That's what he's recorded 8 special teams tackles. He's blocked a punt. This guy has been a real weapon on special teams, and we know how big a deal that has been for the Ravens, especially during the Harbaugh regime. Harbaugh prides himself on special teams. So after losing a Malik Harrison and losing a Chris Board, picking up Jake Hummel is instantly going to help shore up our special teams, especially when you lose 718 snaps with those two guys being gone. So that's something else for us to watch. Welcome to Jake Hummel. We're proud to have you part of One Flock, part of the Ravens family. This is something, again, a 1-year deal. You're going to hear that a lot. Why? Because the Ravens are obviously in win now mode. Every single one of these moves that have been made thus far are made on trying to make sure that this next season is everything that we expect it to be and that I expect it to be. And we'll talk more about that in a second. One that I was super happy about, and many others that I've talked to were super happy about. Patrick Ricard, fullback. We know we're in a league that for years has not valued the fullback. In fact, a lot of rosters don't even have a fullback. The Ravens, we've got a fullback that is a huge part of our offense, and re-signing Patrick Ricard was a key signing for the Ravens. Patrick Ricard, we're happy to have him back. The man is huge. What is he, 6'3", 311 pounds? I mean, this guy is like lineman size, but it's all muscle, and he can move and he can run. And seeing that chemistry that Patrick Ricard had with Derrick Henry, and that plow, that, D8 coming through, knocking down defensive players. I mean, it just, that tandem, Derrick Henry with Patrick Ricard, is something that worked so effectively last year. In the very first year that these two guys played together, you can only imagine as they built that chemistry and as the playbook continues to open up, what retaining both of those pieces will mean for this offense next year. So again, the Ravens signing Pat Ricard is just, it's a huge signing. Anytime that you see those two guys on the field, the defense is nervous. In fact, one of the quotes I remember early in the year that Derrick Henry said, he said that anytime Pat Ricard is in the game, he said, I feel comfortable. And why would you not? Why would you not? Derrick Henry, whoever he comes across, running behind big boy, well, whoever that guy is already hurting from the impact he had with Pat Ricard. So this, again, win now mode. The Ravens are making a lot of moves, and they have secured some moves that are retaining, because you got to keep in mind, we have, free agency isn't just about, what new compositions and what new pieces you can add to your roster. In a case like the Baltimore Ravens, it's as much about what you can retain, what you can keep. And why do I say that? Because when you have the number one offense, whether that be passing or rushing in the NFL, if you can retain key pieces or a lot of that made it work, you're already head and shoulders above everyone else. Because even when you get big time, new additions, you don't know how that chemistry is going to work out. You don't know exactly how these guys are going to play together. You're not sure what you're getting. You can have an idea, but when you know that you had the number one offense the previous year, you can keep those players. You can keep those guys in there. That is huge, and that's why keeping a Pat Ricard was a big win for the Ravens, but not nearly as big. And everyone out there, all the talking heads, all the free agency guys, even ESPN, who graded the Ravens free agency moves thus far as a B-, above average, good offseason moves. But the best move of the entire free agency, ESPN and many others, and myself, have been on record of saying was Ronnie Stanley. Ronnie Stanley has been argued by many as he was the most valuable player in free agency this year. And if you don't believe it, all you got to do is look at the numbers. Look at what's not only happened with the free agents, the limited free agents at left tackle, but look at the draft and look who's coming. It's a very thin draft at left tackle. What gives value to anything? Rarity. Rarity. Ronnie Stanley was the get. We got Ronnie Stanley for the bargain of $20 million a year. Is that a lot of money? Yes. Is it a lot of money in today's market for a left tackle that is the best left tackle available via draft or free agency? No. As we talked about in the previous episode, the Kansas City Chiefs just gave $15 million for a guy that has never started in the NFL. He's a backup from the 49ers who only played 9 games last year. Ronnie Stanley would have been paid a lot of money. He would have been able to name his price if he had went out and shopped. The Ravens signing Lamar Jackson's left tackle for several years now is a huge deal, and what made it even a bigger deal is being able to do it at the price point at which they did so, at that $20 million, which is a bargain in this market. Now, is durability a concern with Ronnie Stanley? Yes. Last year was the first year that I've seen him play the entire season healthy, and we saw what that looked like. It was impressive. It was excellent play. But the question mark that of course, in all our minds hangs over Ronnie Stanley is, will he be able to repeat that healthy season? Well, we all hope so. And of course, Eric DeCosta does as well. But if you're going to roll the dice on anybody at left tackle to protect Lamar Jackson, there was no one that was a better option in this free agency or in this upcoming draft than Ronnie Stanley. And so a huge win, a ginormous win for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, some out there will tell you that was not the biggest move the Baltimore Ravens made. Some will tell you that a certain gator hunter, turkey hunter, hunter of all things wild, a certain Ben Cleveland is the win-win of the Ravens offseason. We did hear, to my shock and probably everybody else's out there, that Ben Cleveland has been re-signed to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, why is that a big deal? And what really led to that happening? Well, I believe it was two things. First of all, Patrick McCarry, who has been our Swiss Army knife on the offensive line for years, he left. He got paid. He went to the Jaguars. And losing a Patrick McCarry, instantly what that does is that makes you thinner across the line, because Patrick McCarry could line up, on the left, on the right, at center. We moved him around everywhere, and he was serviceable, and that's what made him unique and valuable, and that's why he got paid like he did with this recent offseason move. But guess who else we've been using in that way? Big Ben Cleveland. Yes, Ben Cleveland, I believe, is the new Patrick McCarry for this season coming up, and he'll be used. And what will we get out of Ben? Well, we've seen a lot of people were calling for Ben to start over Falele, because the argument was he played better. Now, of course, Falele improved as the season went along, but if Ben really is better than Falele, and now he's your Swiss Army knife, this is a good move, and a cheap move, a league minimum move, where the Ravens were able to secure Ben Cleveland on this deal, no bonuses, league minimum deal. It gets, again, cap was an issue when we started the season, and all of these moves, whether the $5 million, which is a bargain for DeAndre Hopkins, the league minimum for Ben Cleveland, the $20 million for the best left tackle available, and Ronnie Stanley, EDC showing out. So this is great. So we have Ben Cleveland now. He's signed. He's had some emotional issues, we know, going through the divorce, wife cheating on him allegedly, and And maybe, they got into his head. Maybe now in the offseason, he gets to refocus and comes back hungry on this short-term deal to prove himself. And if that's the case, because work ethic, some have suggested might have been the reason why Harbaugh wasn't necessarily enamored with being Cleveland. His work ethic maybe wasn't what Harbaugh wanted. But you never know. When you're in the aftermath of dealing with something emotional as close as family and that sort of stuff, divorce, sometimes the way people deal with it in the aftermath is they get absorbed in their work. So who knows what Ben Cleveland we get this year. But at the price we got him for, great depth piece that we've picked up at offensive line, which is going to be key. But this next one, man, we haven't talked about this one at all. This one happened since our last episode. And this was surprising to me, but I like it. Cooper Rush. I remember the first time I saw Cooper Rush, it was when Dak was hurt. And this guy comes in off the bench. And the Dallas Cowboys were winning games at a rate they hadn't done with Dak as the starter. And everybody was like, Cooper Rush, wow, who is this guy? Well, maybe it was just a stint. Because since then, obviously, as a journeyman, he's calmed down. His winning percentages aren't what they were in that first appearance where we saw a good cross-section of his work. However, what you can say about Cooper Rush is that he has experience. He doesn't make costly mistakes, which any Dallas Cowboy fan you talk to, who I know a few, you guys do as well, they will tell you that that's their biggest complaint about Dak, the big mistakes he makes in big moments. But Cooper Rush, just fundamentally sound. He doesn't make big mistakes in big moments. And if we look back at whenever Lamar Jackson wasn't in the game and we lost all the games that we lost if Lamar Jackson was out, RG3, Tyler Huntley, Anthony Brown, these were all serviceable backups, but they made so many mistakes. We'll never forget, the Snoop trying to reach over and the fumble, remember? Cooper Rush doesn't make those mistakes. He's got a lot of experience. And again, at $3 million a year, to have a guy who has played the amount that he's played, who has the ability to hit your receivers, has worked with an offense that utilized both the running game like the Cowboys did with their running backs where they had Ezekiel Elliott and they had those wide receivers and weapons. He's worked that kind of offense. And you think, that if you need him to come in for a game or two, you should be able to have a very, very, very good backup there. Of course, we don't want to see our backup quarterback. But if we do, it's nice to know that perhaps the drop-off is not going to be as drastic as it has been in years past. So this was a surprising move for me for the Baltimore Ravens. But once again, win-now mode. It's a very good move. And again, I'm not unhappy with Cooper Rush being here at all. Now, what about that cap situation? Now, we've shopped a lot of bargains. But when you're shopping bargains, if you started off with only $10 million roughly in cap space, you got to make room as well. You got to create some more space. And the Ravens made a big move in doing that and restructuring Marlon Humphrey's deal. Marlon Humphrey, they did a max restructure of his deal. Now, Marlon Humphrey isn't giving up any money with this restructure. All that means is they reduced, it says his $18 million salary and roster bonus. They reduced that to the league minimum of $1.255 million. And they converted the remaining $16.5 million roughly to 2 void years and bonus money. So it added 2 void years. And of course, that restructuring of his contract, by that large chunk of it becoming bonus money, it frees up roughly $13.396 million in the cap this year. That is huge. Having another almost $14 million just by restructuring Marlon Humphrey. Now, why in the world, this is where I get excited. Why are the Ravens freeing up $14 million in additional cap space? It's because they're not done making moves. There's some target. There is something in the bowl. in the recipe that the Ravens have up their sleeve that's going to require this money, and that's why they have gone about doing it. Now, what potentially could that be? Well, first of all, let's look at the needs. We'll look at some of the needs, and we've addressed a lot of the moves, key moves that have helped retain what we had that was good last year, that was dominant last year in our football team. We also have talked about key additions like DeAndre Hopkins, huge addition for the wide receiver room. Veteran leadership, sure-handed wide receiver, someone who's going to demand attention, give you depth if one of your one or your two wide receivers gets hurt. But what else do we need? Well, we know about the secondary. We lost Brandon Stephens, who many were excited about losing, but however you felt about Brandon Stephens did have one very good year. Last year, he struggled as a target for many offensive coordinators because he couldn't get his head turned around and couldn't make the plays on the ball. He was always in the right spot, but rarely made the right play on the ball. Well, when you lose that guy to the New York Jets and you also release Arthur Maulet, well, suddenly your depth in the secondary, particularly at corner, is thin. And we know how many injuries we've seen in just one season. In the secondary, you see a lot. Why do you see so many soft tissue injuries in the secondary? Well, think about it. Whereas a wide receiver is running a route, a wide receiver can prepare for the cut he's about to make. You know, the wide receiver knows the route. Corners, safeties, they are violently running. One of the most violent things you can do is run at a all-out run, sprint. That's one of the most violent things you can do. If you don't believe me, look up the video on what's the guy's name? Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart was trying to run, and he tore everything. He was in a wheelchair for weeks. Running full speed is a violent thing to do. And in the secondary, when you're trying to cover a wide receiver who you don't know when he's going to stop, when he's going to change direction, well, that's why you see so many injuries, soft tissue injuries for corners and safeties, because they're doing this high speed, quick change, and they're having to do it on a dime where they're not preparing their body for the switch, whereas the wide receiver is able to do that. We lost two. Tre'Davious White, we added him last year, and that was a good add, but he's still a free agent right now, so we haven't secured him again. So I wouldn't be surprised if we make another move at corner, because that's obviously a need. The draft has some nice corners in it. If you've been looking at some of these guys that are out there, there's a kid from Iowa State, Porter, I think is what his name is. And then there's another guy that I like that was from Texas. That both of these guys, I can't pronounce the guy's first name. I want to say his last name was Barron. But they both really nice corners that I think might still be around for when the Ravens might be picking in the first or the second round. If corner becomes our first pick of the 27 pick, I wouldn't be surprised. Because, again, that defense is solid. But the secondary does need some depth built. So be prepared. We may still see some free agency moves at corner as well. You don't know. But what about safety? Same thing. We got Kyle Hamilton, right? But we need some help. And what about that? Well, there's a lot of depth. Again, if you look at this draft, there's a lot of guys. I mean, if you pick who you want. I wouldn't be surprised if in the draft we really pick up some safeties. There's some names out there. Georgia's got a kid that's really nice, Starks. Texas A&M, they got a kid. His name's Nick Eminem or something like that. But the guy is special. So there's guys there, and I wouldn't be surprised. Safety or corner, our first round pick would not surprise me at all. But you got to have that versatility. You have to have that depth in your secondary. And this is where we can expect, and this is where I expect to see some significant moves made. Now, we were all sad to see Michael Pierce go. I was surprised by it. Michael Pierce retiring after last year. So on our D-line, you got to have pressure from the middle, right? And how are we going to provide that pressure that Michael Pierce was able to provide? Well, yeah, we still got Nnamdi Madubuike. Yeah, that's the centerpiece. We also have Travis Jones. We got Broderick Washington. But what are we gonna do? We gotta replace our boy Pierce. Well, we got 11 picks coming up. We got 11 picks coming up in this draft. So expect for another big boy to be added to the defensive line, because that's something we're going to need to, losing Pierce was that's something we're going to feel. So we got to make sure that we do something about that and expect EDC to have something in the bag for that. The interior offensive line is one of those things you need to also pay attention to, because we've got Andrew Voorhees, right? Which, Makari being gone, you think about, well, Ben Cleveland, we picked him up. So does he slip into that? Well, if we think about how Makari was used as a Swiss Army knife, we really didn't commit him to any one position. So you still want to think that maybe the Ravens are going to look into the draft to see about, getting someone, or maybe even signing a veteran to get inside on the interior of that offensive line. But this is something to pay attention to. Look for something to happen. I expect for this to take place, if not in free agency, what's left of it, definitely in the draft. Special teams, we already talked about how getting Hummel was a big move in that. I don't think that'll be the last move in that case, because, again, we lost two guys, 718 snaps. So picking up Hummel, I believe, was the beginning. I believe you'll also see another play here soon that will help shore up special teams for the Baltimore Ravens. So we've got a lot of work that's been done. We've retained most of our team, most of the depth of talent. I think coming into the preseason, already, even without the draft hasn't happened yet. Think about this, folks. The draft has not happened yet. And already, with what we have right now, the Baltimore Ravens could take the field and be better than almost every team in the NFL. Let that settle in. And on top of that, you have the best player in the NFL. You have the real MVP of last year, Lamar Jackson. And you've secured DeAndre Hopkins, which is, you would have to say that his weapon assortment has gotten better than what it was last year. You still have Derrick Henry. You still have Pat Ricard. You still have Zay Flowers. You still have Rashad Bateman. You still have Isaiah Likely. You still have Mark Andrews right now. Right now, the Baltimore Ravens, before draft night has even happened, because of these offseason moves, because of retaining the Ronnie Stanleys, retaining the Tylan Wallaces, we're better than we were last year. And that's scary, because we were already one of the most dominant teams in the NFL. So I'm excited. I already proclaimed it. You heard it here first. I do believe the Baltimore Ravens are in line for a Super Bowl next year. That is not fan talk. That is what I believe, based not only what my heart's saying, but more importantly about when I look at this team and what I know about the players that are on our roster, starting with our captain, Lamar Jackson. This team is primed and ready to go. Great moves that we've seen in the offseason. And so that's something that's going to be good. But how are we going to be watching next season? I wanted to mention this because this is going to affect, of course, with us being here on YouTube and One Flock, we pride ourselves on not being part of the machine of media that we're force-fed narratives and things about sports, about everything, really, the big-time media. But there's a move that I want you guys to keep your eyes on that surfaced this week. Anthony Chapman, digital sports reporter, reported that ESPN is in talks for an over $2 billion deal with the NFL, which would receive major broadcasting change, the live TV rights, and Red Zone. Yeah, that's right. NFL Network, NFL Red Zone, all of that going to ESPN. Can you imagine? That's a real deal right now. ESPN is really making a big play to have even more power over what we see in the media as far as NFL coverage. If this goes through, that's a huge acquisition for ESPN, and I'll keep you posted. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that if that happens. The only downside of that is when you get one big conglomerate that controls so much of the broadcasting space. In years past, what that meant was you were about to get what they wanted you to hear and nothing else. Well, thankfully, One Flock, we don't have to worry about that. We're right here. We got our family. We got our online family. We got Engraving Vids. You know what I mean? We got the Vault. We got One Flock. You know, we got the Wonder Kin Show. We got listen, we got real coverage, real people, real stories. We got the truth available whenever we need it. And that's why I'm so glad you guys are here. That's what it's really all about. We cry together sometimes. We get excited together, right? But at the end of the day, we're here to talk about facts. We're here to have fun. And the unadulterated truth, we don't want the political stuff. The let's give Josh Allen a MVP because it's his turn, even though Lamar Jackson had an all-time season that crushed not just Josh Allen, but everybody. You know, we call it like it is. And we aren't burdened down by the big media deals. So just wanted to pass that along, though, because I know some of you guys, if you like Red Zone like I do, if you see ESPN sending you something in the mail talking about, hey, you want your Red Zone this year? You'll understand why now. This I thought was interesting, too. Anybody ever had questions? I know I used to. What's up with the compensatory picks? We know that the Baltimore Ravens are constantly, Eric DeCosta is always, in the play, and you hear people talk about how much he loves his compensatory picks. Well, what are those? Nobody really ever went to explaining what it was. Yeah, I knew it had something to do with when you lose players, but this is what this is. The Ravens, when they lose players, when any NFL franchise loses players in free agency, at the same time, you may gain some players in free agency. Well, if you have a deficit, meaning you lose more players in free agency, more teams, more players leave your team as a result of the free agency than come to you, which leaves you at a deficit of players on your roster. You become eligible for what's called compensatory picks in the latter rounds of the NFL draft if, and this is the caveat, if the players you lose in free agency demand a certain amount of money. It has to be a minimum amount of money that they end up making that some other team pays them to leave you. Well, as a result of this, this year, the Ravens, we've already been projected to receive 3 compensatory picks. 2 fifth-round picks for losing Brandon Stevens, who we already talked about. We lost Patrick McCarry. Both of them got paid enough money to where we would get a compensatory pick for them. The other is a 7th-round pick for losing Josh Jones, which was, of course, we learned about that a couple of weeks ago as well. But Deontay Johnson, remember him? Remember that failed acquisition? And it got strange because after we released Deontay Johnson, the wide receiver, former Pittsburgh Steeler, at the end of the season, we reacquired him. And a lot of fans were like, why? Compensatory pick. The idea is that Deontay Johnson, if he's on our roster and another team signs him, speculation says, for at least $5 million, which is reasonable for Deontay Johnson at his age, then the Ravens could pick up another compensatory pick that would give us 4 in the 2026 draft. So again, I just want to take some time to explain that because previously that's something that was a mystery to me. It was like, what are we talking about with compensatory picks? That's what it is. So potentially right now, from the moves that have been made thus far this year, we have a deficit. We could be looking at a deficit of 4 players from free agency moves that will have demanded enough money by the team that took them from us that we'll get 4 picks in the 2026 latter rounds as compensatory picks to replace those players. So that's a little bit of tidbit. Hey, man, it's all about learning right here at One Flock. You know, I like to believe that our IQ keeps increasing. Our IQ keeps increasing as we get through this season. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on before we get out of here is my boy, Lamar Jackson. We're going to have to get Lamar on the show. Listen, Lamar is one of the best people you will ever meet. And I'm not just saying that. I'm saying it because it's true. When he was here in Louisville, when he was, you know, interacting with his teammates, interacting with the fans, interacting with media, Lamar Jackson was always a pleasure to deal with. The way he dealt with the community, the way he dealt with adversity, the way he dealt with everything. And you're talking about a college kid. As he's continued to develop, and now that he's in the pros, Lamar Jackson, what we have with him being our quarterback is extremely special. And I know a lot of people don't, you know, give him his proper due for that aspect of who he is. You know, a lot of people don't give him his proper due for the aspect of what he does athletically, what he does as a quarterback, as a football player, as an MVP. But who he is as a person and as a role model is just amazing. And as an actor myself, as someone who has spent years, you know, in honing that trade, whether it be on stage or film, television, it's really where I got my start. I was really excited when I heard that this guy, Lamar Jackson, is now, you know, stepping his toes into that world. Lamar Jackson will be working with some other acquaintances of mine. He's going to be in an upcoming episode of Power. Of course, Power has I think this is the 3rd installment. Let me just read it here. This is going to be Power Book 3, Raising Canaan. He gave a statement to People magazine. He said, "I'm so excited for fans to see me in this new role and thrilled to be a part of Power Book 3. His character is going to be a character by the name of E-Tone, which is, he described, a deadly, dangerous character. And you don't want to get on that guy's bad side. So congratulations, Lamar, man. I'm really excited for you. I was glad to hear that this is a cameo appearance, because I got nervous because there was another guy who was the greatest in his sport at the time. His name was Roy Jones Jr. And Roy Jones Jr. got into acting. He did The Matrix. And after that, Roy Jones Jr. career went south. Not saying that's what Lamar's going to do. Lamar is the epitome of focus. You don't have to worry about Lamar losing focus ever. That guy is, when I say his ethic is unbelievable, you will never talk to a coach that has worked with Lamar Jackson who will not tell you how this dude is just, he's absorbed in being the best. He's absorbed in being the best. And what by best, the best that he can be. He's not comparing himself to other people. This dude is trying to be the best that he can be every day. And that's something that hopefully, you know, you want to talk about role models, that's something that I, you know, take from Lamar. That's something that hopefully we all can take from Lamar. Whatever it is that you do, be the best that you can be at it. Work every day, every hour of that day, every minute of that day at being the best. And guess what? You can't fail. Man, what an episode. The Baltimore Ravens are working right now on being the best in the NFL and taking home, finally, in this wonderful era, the Lamar Jackson era, that prized Lombardi Trophy. I believe it will be 2026. But until then, we got so many more moves to make. We'll see what happens. Next month is the big month. with the draft coming up. And leading up into that, we'll be keeping you updated on everything Ravens related. But until the next episode, I want to say thank you as your host. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe, give us a like, tell somebody else about what you experienced here. And we look forward to seeing you back, because this is what we do. We have fun. We enjoy this amazing sport, and we enjoy each other. Love to see your comments. Please, you got anything to say? You got feelings? You disagree with anything I said today? Drop it in there. I'll be sure to respond. I love the comments. I read all of those. And if you want to support the channel, please check out our Patreon. There's ways to do that as well, and sponsorships, anything like that. But other than that, I'm your host, Rob Love. Remember, if there's one thing this world will never be too full of, that thing is love. So do yourself a favor. Do me a favor. Find somebody out there who needs a little bit more love in their life, and love them, all right? For One Flock, I'm your host, Rob Love, saying thank you for flying with the brother. We'll see you next time. Let's get it done.
We take the field as one flock. Come on, Ravens, here we go as one flock. We keep grinding till we soar to the top. Come on, Ravens, here we go as one flock. We keep grinding till we soar to the top. Let's go, Ravens, let's go, Ravens.